Hello, thank you so much for joining us for the second webinar in the College Week Live Professional Development Series. We hope this session will provide you value, will be able to help you prepare your students for college success. Please note that in order to receive hours towards your CEU, you must complete the brief survey at the end of this presentation. Before we get started, I would like to remind our audience that we will be taking questions in real time throughout this presentation. You can send us questions anytime during the program in the box on the lower left-hand side of your screen. Welcome once again. My name is Jose Riola. I serve as the Outreach and Organizing Manager at an organization called Educators for Fair Consideration in San Francisco. I'm also joined by Carlos in Los Angeles, so we'll allow him to introduce himself as well.
Thank you, Jose. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Carlos Castellanos, Jr. I am a recent alumni from UCLA. I served as the co-chair for IDEAS at UCLA, one of the nation's leading support and advocacy group for undocumented students, and I am also a part of United We Dream, the nation's largest support and advocacy group for undocumented students. As Jose said, we are here to help educate all of you and hope that all our information can really be taken back to your students and made so much bigger. I'm sorry, I'm kind of nervous at the moment, but made into reality and helping these students really achieve everything that they have in their potential. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Really appreciate everybody for the opportunity to present to all of you. I am not just the outreach manager at Educators for Fair Consideration. I myself am an undocumented immigrant. I came to the U.S. when I was about 4 years old from Durango, Mexico. I grew up here in the South Bay in Mountain View, California. I'm very proud, very honored to have received a college education. And since graduating from college, I've served in this capacity at E4FC. But I certainly am not an educator myself, but everything we will present to you today comes from the tremendous network that we have of educators and allies all around the country that have dedicated so much to helping support our students, and also comes from our own knowledge of what it's like to have to go through the education system as an undocumented immigrant. So in getting started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what this presentation will be, what we'll be going over. So as you can see the agenda in front of you, I'm going to be providing a little bit of background on E4FC just to give folks a sense of what E4FC is. I'll be providing a basic overview, some numbers, some statistics for undocumented students all around the country. We're going to be going over some really relevant and important policies and laws that pertain to undocumented students. And then we'll end with some best practices for how to support, empower, and advise undocumented students. And then at the very end, we'll have some time for Q&A. But like I said, we will be taking questions right here on the screen. We'll be taking questions throughout the presentation, so please feel free to ask. But please note that if you do ask a question throughout the presentation, we might actually get to it at some point in our presentation throughout. So again, thank you so much for being here. I do want to tell you a little bit about me and a little bit about an educator that made a tremendous amount of difference in my life. As you can see here, this is me at my college graduation. Certainly was a very proud moment. And right beside me is my high school AVID teacher. And there was one particular assignment that he provided us where we had to make a poem, or we had to emulate a poet. And when I went to go turn in my assignment, his name's Mr. Kale. Mr. Kale comes back to me and he says, "No, I need you to redo this, and I need you to turn this in again." And he had me do it again and again and again, over and over and over and over again. And all the while I thought I just wasn't getting it. I wasn't doing this right. And by the last draft, he comes back and he tells me, "Jose, this is probably one of the best pieces of writing I've ever read. And if you really wanted to, you could be a professional writer." And that's the first time that anyone had ever said anything remotely like that to me and had believed in me in such a way. And so the environment that he was able to create just in that moment, that connection he was able to build, allowed me to, when I was a junior and everyone else, all of my peers were looking at college applications, I came to him and I said, "Hey, look, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to go to college because I'm not a U.S. citizen. I don't have papers in this country. I'm not even sure if I can go to college." And his first response was, I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure I can get you the answers. And so what he did is he researched, stayed after school, and he provided me every piece of research. Now again, this was in 2004, 2005, where there wasn't a lot of awareness, there wasn't a lot of resources out there for undocumented students. But he did find what ultimately would be the university that I went to, which is Santa Clara University, where I was able to get a tremendous amount of support. And it was really his decision, his ability to go above and beyond, that made the best difference for me. And so we're hoping that the information that we can provide you today will really enable you to make that same difference in the students that you work with. So again, a little bit about E4FC. Here's our mission. We're dedicated to empowering undocumented young people in their pursuit of college, career, and citizenship. Here's our staff, so you can get a sense of who we are. Probably the most unique thing, the best thing, for, at least in my mind, about working at E4FC is that all of our programs are led by currently undocumented or formerly undocumented immigrants or formerly undocumented young people. And so it's been a tremendous gift to me to be surrounded by such a brilliant and talented cohort of folks, all of us dedicated to helping to uplift our own communities. I'm just going to go through our programs very, very quickly just to give folks a sense of what our programming looks like. So we have a scholarship that we provide. It's called the New American Scholars Program, just for undocumented students. We have a legal services program that I'll talk a little bit more about later on. We do outreach and organizing. We have a student support and career services program, and we also have an arts and creativity program that again I'll talk about in a little bit. We also have a tremendous amount of resources. Literally everything that I'm going to be saying and so much more is going to be all up on our website, free to download, guides for students, educators, parents in English and Spanish. So I'm going to start very basic. So given for the folks that have no sense, that have very little understanding or familiarity with the issue, what does it mean to be undocumented in the first place? Well, being undocumented means that you don't have legal authorization to be present in the United States. And there's basically two major ways that people become undocumented in the U.S., or immigrants become undocumented in the U.S. One is to enter without an authorization. So cross the border, however it is, folks make it over the border, at which point they become undocumented. The second is to actually enter with authorization or enter with a visa, but overstay the terms of that visa. So that's actually what I did. I came to the United States on a maybe like 2 or 3 month tourist visa and overstayed it by like 23 years. And it's about a 50-50 split. 50% of all undocumented immigrants come without authorization, 50% come with authorization, and then are not able to extend their visas, and so they tend to overstay. Here's a little bit of, in terms of numbers, kind of the national population in the United States. And again, these are just estimates. I imagine there aren't a lot of undocumented immigrants in the country that are very willing to come out and tell the Census Bureau that they're undocumented. But again, these are some numbers that you can see nationally. And I think the most important thing about this is to realize that our population, our community is incredibly diverse. As you can see, we have undocumented immigrants from China, from the Philippines, from India, from Korea, from Vietnam, all over the country. And I've been able to meet undocumented folks from every single country you can possibly think of. And so it's important that we all recognize that immigration, as well as being undocumented, is not just a Latino issue, right? And there's really no way of knowing whether or not someone is or is not undocumented. So we have to be cognizant of the assumptions that we make. These are some national numbers, and again, you folks can kind of read this. 11 to 12 million undocumented people in the United States. Between 1.1 and 1.5 million of them are under the age of 18. So it's a fairly young population. Every year we have about 65,000 undocumented students that graduate from high school. And of that 65,000, we have between 7,000 and 13,000 that are able to actually enroll at an institution of higher education. We unfortunately don't have a lot of accurate numbers in terms of how many of those folks are able to go on and complete college. But as you can see, these are the numbers that we're trying to increase over time. These are some statistics that are California focused, and I recognize this is a national webinar, so this might not be pertinent to most folks, but one thing I do want to let you know is that what we have here is actually a population breakdown per county here in the Bay Area, which is where we do a lot of our work. And what this has enabled us to do is actually strategically think about the outreach or the resources that we build in our region. So this actually provides us an enormous amount of information to know where counties are the most heavily populated. So now we're going to get into relevant policies and laws. Again, I'm going to be going through this fairly quickly, and this can get a little dense, but I ask for your patience and to know that we'll be certainly around at the end to be able to answer any questions if we can. If not, like I said, there's a tremendous amount of resources on our website and a lot of resources that I'll refer you to, as well as I'm sure Carlos has a lot of resources as well. Probably the most important decision to begin with was a Supreme Court decision, Plyler v. Doe in 1982, and that Supreme Court decision basically said or guarantees that an undocumented student can get a K through 12 public education. Right? The decision said that we cannot deny a public K through 12 education to students because if we were to do so, we would create a permanent underclass, and that was kind of the decision that the Supreme Court made, and it's been upheld, and that's how students are able to at least get up to a high school education. Unfortunately, the decision doesn't really say anything about higher education, so that's where a lot of the advocacy and a lot of our work comes in. The next, probably the most important, the major policy that we're looking at federally is DACA. It stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. But before I actually get into the policy, I think it's actually incredibly important to recognize the tremendous amount of work, activism, and the risk that so many undocumented immigrants, many of whom are younger than me, took to pressure the administration to pass some type of administrative relief in the wake of so many deportations, in the wake of so much struggle and so much suffering going on in our communities around our immigration system. So it really is thanks to them, thanks to everyone who has ever advocated for this, that we have this program. So what is DACA? So DACA is a program. It is not a law. It is not an executive order. It is a program by the Department of Homeland Security that will provide eligible undocumented youth with a two-year work authorization and 2-year protection from deportation. So how does it work? So once you are approved for deferred action, you receive a work authorization. That work authorization can serve as your federal photo ID. You can take that work authorization to the Social Security Administration, get a Social Security card. You can also travel domestically safely with all of those IDs. And then depending on the state, students or young folks should be able to or not be able to, depending on the state, get a state ID or a state driver's license. And again, that varies state to state. Certainly here in California, folks are able to get a state driver's license. And I know Carlos has something to add here.
Yeah, so as Jose was saying, DACA is just a program, right? It really differentiates from state to state, right? And so for those that do want to kind of take an extra step in their involvement, we definitely encourage you to seek out your community organizations that are involved with the immigrant rights issue. Arizona, in particular, is one of the states that has kind of a bad reputation with the immigrant community. But there's other states across the country as well, and so if you really, would like to take your advocacy a little bit further, then we definitely encourage you to seek out. Google has definitely. They all have pages. Ideas at UCLA. We have our website has different groups across the country that can be in touch with, or United We Dream as well. E4FC does as well. And so we definitely encourage you to, this fight is far from over, and so if you really, do find it in yourself to take it just a step further, then by all means go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Carlos. So again, deferred action is not a law. It is not an executive order. It is a program. So it is not any type of legal status. So for all intents and purposes, even with deferred action, a person is still considered undocumented. It just so happens that we have a work authorization and are able to be protected from deportation, but we cannot use DACA as a means of gaining legal status later on in any way. So it's incredibly important that we make this distinction. I think Carlos spoke to that as well. And to also know that it's temporary, that if we had a change in administration or if there was a law passed or an executive order that was pushed through, that would supersede this program. So I think it's incredibly important for us to take that into account. Here are the eligibility requirements. I'm not going to go over them in an enormous amount of detail. All of these are outlined both on our website, on UWD's website, on uscis.gov. But you can get a general sense of who are the folks that can apply or that can request deferred action. So folks that have come before the age of 16, that have continuously resided for 5 years, that are under the age of 31. You have to be over 15 in order to request it, unless you're in deportation proceedings, at which case you can petition at any moment. You have to be obviously out of legal status. You have to be currently enrolled in school, and there's some flexibility here. That currently enrolled in school means that you can be in any institution that's accredited. So certainly that means an accredited high school, but it also could mean a vocational school. It could mean professional training. Carlos, do you have something to add here?
Yeah, so for educators across the country, DACA has definitely been a reason for encouraging students to go back to school, right? So if they have every other requirement, but they don't have that particular educational one, we definitely encourage students, right, to come in and really make that adjustment, because it's definitely worthwhile in the long run. Back to you, Jose.
Thank you, Carlos. So in addition, or be honorably discharged from our military, and certainly we have quite a few undocumented folks that serve in our armed forces. The last piece is that they cannot be convicted of any felonies, or can have more than 3 of any misdemeanors, or can have any significant misdemeanors. USCIS outlines what they mean by significant misdemeanors on the website, and then you have to prove that you were present in the U.S. on June 15th, 2012. So what does the process look like? So basically you take documents. Now you can use transcripts, you can use attendance records, you can use medical records, you can use receipts, bank statements, and we have on our website again outlined all the possible methods of proving documentation here. But you take all those documents that prove all the eligibility requirements that I just outlined. You fill out your forms, your I-821W, and your I-765 and 765W. Sorry, my apologies. I-821D, I-765 and 765W. You put that all together with a $465 check to the Department of Homeland Security. You submit that, and the website will tell you where to mail you, depending on what region you're in. And then you wait for a biometrics appointment, which is just a background check. They'll go in, they'll do your fingerprinting, they'll take a picture, and they'll do a background check generally for you. And then at that point, you just wait. You wait. You can check online to see what your status is. And the wait time, in our experience, has varied quite a bit. There has been folks that have gotten their DACA within a month. There have been some folks that have had to wait 5-6 months, and sometimes even longer. So I think initially USCIS was not ready for the amount of petitions they would end up getting. But I think they've been able to build up quite a bit of capacity and certainly have been able to move through pretty quickly. Carlos, do you have something to add here?
Yeah, so all the documents that Jose just mentioned, the 821D, the 765, and 765W, they're all available online. They're all available on the USCIS website. And so we strongly encourage educators to inform their students that they should not have to pay for any of these forms. Too many times students come back and saying, oh, somebody wants to help me with this application, but they want to charge me X amount for forms. That's not the case. All these forms are free, but the help from a legal attorney or a legal assistant, that may come up with a certain cost. However, it's not absolutely necessary. If they have particular situations where they have, somebody has been out of the country for a while, or they have some sort of outstanding record with the authorities, then they definitely need to talk to an attorney. But outside of that, standard cases can actually go without the help, and as long as everything is put together very, very well, it should be fine.
Exactly, and that's actually a really great segue into the next point, which is just some red flags to be cognizant of. And again, these aren't automatic disqualifiers, but if a student has any of these red flags, it's very important for them to actually check in with an immigration attorney before they submit their form. Now again, make sure that it's a credible immigration attorney, that it's not an notario, or that it's not an immigration consultant, that it needs to be an immigration attorney that is credible within that community. Again, the red flags are any type of criminal history or contact with law enforcement, any type of gang involvement, if there has ever been any previous contact with immigration officials, they certainly should check in with an immigration attorney about that. If they've traveled outside of the U.S. since they've arrived, so for example, I arrived in 1992, so if I left the country at any point since then, that I should definitely check with an immigration attorney. Again, this is not an automatic disqualifier. USCIS does allow for some, as they call it, brief, innocent, and casual visits abroad, and so they'll make that determination. But again, it's important to check. And the final piece is if there's any use of false documentation, so a fake Social Security number, a fake driver's license. And again, this is not meant to catch people that have been working with a fake social or anything like that. Really, what they're looking at is when that becomes something like identity fraud. So if somebody uses a fake social to get a mortgage or a private loan, that's more the stuff that they're looking at. They're not looking to catch folks that have just been working and been trying to earn a living in this country. Here's some resources. We have a ton of resources on our website. I'm not going to go over all of them here, but know that these are all housed on the website for you and for you to be able to help support your students. We have a Dreamer intake service that if a student were to fill it out, we could actually tell them what their eligibility looks like for deferred action, in addition to actually telling them all the other possible legal immigration remedies that they might have. We have a step-by-step guide that literally takes folks through the beginning process of thinking about whether they should apply, all the way to the end, all the way to what happens after they've received their DACA, and what are all the challenges, what are all the major questions that happen. At that point, we have an FAQ that's updated quite frequently. So all that resource is up on our website. Please utilize it as best you can. And then the other major resources are housed on USCIS.gov's website / childhood arrivals. They have, as Carlos said, the forms, instructions, directions, everything you need to know right there on the website. Go ahead, Carlos.
So one last point that I wanted to make on DACA is that, so in media there's always been talk about immigration reform. However, it hasn't happened. But DACA is something that is tangible and that students can apply to. And so DACA can be renewed time and time again, right? The program, say a new administration comes in, it can be terminated, but those that have already been approved for DACA and they already have their work permit, they should be fine and they can renew. So that's definitely something that people need to take advantage of, because it's here at the moment. It's something that can be sought out and students can definitely take advantage of.
And we do have a question, actually, that I would like to just real quickly address. So the question is, can students under DACA, use the Social Security number to fill out the FAFSA? So this is definitely a common question, and the answer is no. Even with a Social Security number, DACA beneficiaries will not qualify for any federal money, again, because it's not any type of legal immigration status whatsoever. So that is definitely a no. And again, we'll be getting into financial aid in a little bit. So thank you for that question. The other two, weownthedream.org has a tremendous directory of legal service providers, attorneys throughout the country. And then there's also an app, the Pocket DACA application that you can download that also has a tremendous amount of resources as well. And we also have comprehensive immigration reform. For the past year, we've been going through an incredibly complex process where community advocates, so many folks have been coming out and supporting, strongly advocating, and pushing for what we've needed for many, many years, decades really at this point, which is comprehensive immigration reform. We saw a tremendous step forward when the Senate was able to pass a comprehensive bill, Senate Bill 744, out of the Senate with an overwhelming majority, 68 votes. And so now where comprehensive immigration reform lies is in the House. And so we're still waiting for the House to move on this issue, to be able to provide something to be voted on. We do have some members last week that did introduce some legislation, and hoping that can again push the House to move on this issue, because certainly we need them to. We need to be able to open up a pathway to citizenship for the folks that are here that are undocumented. Because besides that, there's only so much we can do without larger systemic change, and certainly our immigration system needs it quite a bit. So again, we're in the waiting game right now, but our hope is that we'll continue to pressure. We'll continue to pressure the House, and on October 5th, we have a national day of action to recognize the dignity and contributions of immigrants in this country. So again, continue to look forward towards that. And if you want just more updates on immigration reform and what's going on, here's some really fantastic resources. Again, UWD's website is phenomenal. They have folks in D.C. that are continuing to push, continuing to talk to legislators, continuing to advocate on behalf of undocumented young people and our families. Certainly we all need this to pass, and we're at a point now where the majority of the country agrees that a pathway should be opened up to undocumented folks here in this country. I do want to go over some state policies, because certainly policies differ state by state. Here's a little bit of a colored map, but here it is outlined in words. So we have states that have incredibly progressive and very accessible policies for undocumented students, and we have states that have quite prohibitive and quite stringent policies when it comes to undocumented students. So we have, at this point, 18 states that offer in-state tuition, that recognize students as in-state students for the purposes of tuition, as you can read here. 3 of them are Board of Regents decisions. They were not state legislation. The rest were pieces of state legislation that were passed here in California. Our law is called AB 540, and it was passed in 2001. And we've seen a tremendous amount of momentum. Many, many states that have passed legislation, that have passed resolutions, and many more that are looking to pass similar legislation. And then we do have 2 states, Massachusetts and Ohio, who, although do not offer in-state tuition to undocumented students, do offer in-state tuition to DACA beneficiaries, so the folks that are able to get DACA. And there's actually a tremendous amount of movement nationally to have states recognize DACA beneficiaries as residents, because for many, certainly is the case here in California, after a year of having legal presence in the U.S., which DACA is legal presence, it is not legal status, but after a year of having DACA, that folks should actually qualify as residents for the purposes, again, of in-state tuition. So there's a tremendous amount of advocacy happening in different states to try to push folks to recognize that. We also have 5 states that offer financial aid, that take a step further and offer state-based financial aid to undocumented students, California being one of them, Minnesota being the last, or the latest state to be able to turn that. Here in California, we call it the California DREAM Act. Last year was our first round of applications. We have 28,000 undocumented students apply for the California DREAM Act, and thousands that are going to be receiving financial aid packages from the state for the very first time. So it's a tremendous victory, and we're very, very happy to be able to hopefully expand that this year. And then we have states that are on the other side of the spectrum. We have some states that prohibit in-state tuition. So no matter what, a student cannot qualify for in-state tuition in that state. So Arizona, Georgia, Indiana. And then we have some states that have taken it a step further and banned enrollment altogether, either at all of their public universities or in some of their public universities. So South Carolina, Alabama, and then Georgia has prohibited undocumented students from enrolling in their university system. Although we do hear from some folks in Alabama, in South Carolina, that there have been universities that haven't honored that ban and have went ahead and accepted undocumented students anyway. And so we certainly applaud them for their leadership, particularly in such a challenging political climate. But again, it's important for you in the state that you're in to do some research and to be able to figure out what are the major policies that do affect undocumented students in your state. Again, UWD, E4FC, all serve as really great resources to begin that research. Now we want to get into some best practices for how to support undocumented students. What are some of the most effective strategies moving forward? I do want to check on some questions real quick before we move into the section. So Jasmine said, I heard the fee for DACA could be waived. Can you elaborate on this process at all? Carlos, can you talk about that?
Definitely. So it can be. There's definitely a process for it. However, it's very rare. It's very limited to some of the poorest conditions, basically. People that are very, 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 very just unfortunate, I guess you can say. They don't have very much means to get through. All of the requirements are actually on the USCIS website. I couldn't really tell you like an example of somebody that could qualify for the fee waiver. But it's best if someone just calls in to USCIS and kind of elaborates their story, and then they can get their best advice. So I guess in closing, it is possible, but it's very, very rare. So I wouldn't necessarily encourage it. There are very many organizations that offer scholarships for DACA in particular. I'm sure E4FC can also have information on that. IDEAS at UCLA does, and United We Dream does. So I would kind of first encourage the student to go through and try to find a scholarship for it and try to find the means. And if it's not possible, then use that other resource.
Great. Thank you so much, Carlos. We have one other question from Ana, who asks, can students use their Social Security number from DACA on their UC and CSU applications? So what we generally advise students to do is that if you have a Social Security number through DACA, that you actually not put that on your applications. We often find that what that causes is a tremendous amount of confusion, and there's really no reason to. In terms of the UCs, in terms of private schools, private universities, CSUs, applications, all you need to fill out is all zeros on the Social Security box and be able to go ahead and put that in. So thank you, Anna, for that question. And again, there's a tremendous amount of questions coming in. We will try to do our best to be able to respond to as many of these as possible and to follow up if we can't get to all of them in the time that we have here in the program. So first best practice, connect to legal services. So here you can see this is a picture of our legal services team. We have a tremendous group of folks that have been dedicated to helping our legal services move forward. And really the crux of that is our intake service. So we have a free intake online. Again, it's free. Any student in the country can go online, fill it out, submit it, and we will actually review their immigration case. And we will actually provide them a preliminary review of their eligibility, again, for DACA, but we'll also let them know what are their possibilities to legalize through other forms. We reviewed about 1,200 cases up until this point, and what we've actually found that is about a fourth, about 25% of all the undocumented students that have filled out our case intake, our Dreamer intake, about a fourth have actually had a legal immigration remedy that they didn't know about. A fourth. And we're talking about an immediate remedy. So within 6 months, folks could begin the process to actually legalize to become a permanent legal resident and U.S. citizen here in the United States. And that is a tremendous number. And unfortunately, because we don't have a tremendous amount of access to credible legal services, whether it's because of our area or whether it's because of cost, that folks aren't able to get access to a lot of this information. So again, we want to encourage you to go online, fill out the Dreamer intake. We'd love to get that back to your student so that they really know what is their immigration status, what are their options. And I know Carlos wants to add a lot more to this. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm studying law, so this is my my cup of tea. So for those schools that for those educators that are in the proximity of schools that have law schools, UCLA, my alma mater, they have UCLA Law. So we outreached to UCLA Law and we sought out some of the immigration professors and asked if they could be of help. And so they contacted their students, and then those students came and did intake for our organization, in fact. So it's definitely plausible to go to different schools that have a law school and that have an immigration division and ask them if they can be of help. Oftentimes, students need to do a particular amount of hours, and so this could serve as their fulfillment kind of community service. Right, so on other occasions, it's also easy to drop by different immigration offices and ask for, if they can donate their time to a particular cause. Some friends and I got together near UCR, and we held a deferred action clinic, and we had over 1,000 people come out just because the need is there, right? So if you all kind of suspect that need is there, it's definitely within your reach to kind of make some connections, and if not, AILA is always the American Immigration Law Association. They definitely are a big resource. So you can definitely get in touch with them, and they can connect you to different immigration attorneys in your area, and then something like that can kick up.
Great. Thank you so much, Carlos. I do have a couple more questions we want to get to here. I think a lot of them still pertaining to DACA. One, that Narrate has heard that each state has a cap on the number of people who will be eligible to receive DACA. Is this true? From my understanding, no, it is not true. DACA is a federal program. It's not up to the states whether or not they can cap or put a limitation on the number of DACA beneficiaries in their state. So that is not true. One more question: if a student has DACA, are they able to get in-state tuition in any of the 18 states or only in the states that they reside? If I'm understanding this question correctly, each state has their own requirements for in-state tuition. So, for example, here in California, we require that a student be enrolled at California high school for 3 or more years, that they graduate or get a GED, and that they actually fill out an affidavit in order to qualify for AB 540. So every state, each of the 18 states, will have their own requirements. and that also pertains to any student that would move states. So if a student is in Illinois and wants to come here to California, they will also be subject to those requirements. So it really depends on the state for those. But DACA itself does not guarantee in-state tuition. As I said before, having DACA for a year can be interpreted as having a residency. Certainly that's one interpretation that we have here in California, and we hope other states make that same interpretation of the program, but that's not a policy outright. So, and here we have our legal services manager. His name is Krishna. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to email him there. Second is find scholarships. So scholarship money, being able to pay for college, it's still one of the biggest obstacles to undocumented folks being able to go on to college, persist in college, and ultimately graduate. As both, I'm sure, Carlos and I can appreciate having to find some way of funding our own higher educations. So to start, we always want folks to go to our website. We have a guide. It's about 30 pages long, and it outlines a whole bunch of scholarships that don't require Social Security numbers. We think that's a really great start, and we hope that for regions in the country that don't have a list like this, that this can serve also as a template for you to be able to build a list. Now, not all of the scholarships on this list actually outright support undocumented students. They simply do not bar undocumented students from applying. So this is a really great template for anyone in any region who would like to build something as well. And what generally I always tell students is apply anyway. Even if a scholarship requires that they be a U.S. citizen or requires a Social Security number, go ahead and apply anyway, because honestly the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no. They're going to say you're not qualified. Great. Move on to the next scholarship. But what could happen is, and what often happens is, a student goes through the process, becomes a finalist, or actually gets awarded the scholarship, and once the scholarship provider finds out that they're actually undocumented, actually goes back and starts questions and sometimes even changes their eligibility requirements, which opens up that scholarship to a lot more undocumented folks. So again, there's very little risk there. Always encourage folks, at least on my end, to go ahead and apply. Carlos, do you have something as well?
Yeah, so building on what Jose had said, there are some scholarships, surprisingly, believe it or not, that people don't apply for. So if there are students that come across any particular scholarship and it turns out that that's one of the requirements to be a U.S. citizen, as Jose said, apply anyway, right? And in the best possible scenario, then that can be changed or that can still be awarded, right? Or the student can make a case for themselves. And if nobody else is really competing with them, then inevitably that money may still go to that student, right? So just because it has that fine print, still go ahead and do it anyway. You could be kind of setting the trend for another generation of students coming behind you.
So we have a question here. It's a little long. I'm not going to be able to get to the whole question, but the basic crux of the question is that folks have been advised in the past that if students have DACA, that they go ahead and fill out the FAFSA in order to get a student aid report or student need report. So again, students should not be applying for FAFSA if they have a Social Security number through DACA because they don't qualify. But the report that oftentimes is very necessary for different institutions, they might have to fill out. So what we actually tell folks is to fill out a paper FAFSA and actually mail that to the institution. So again, not to go through the online stuff, not to actually submit one, but to print it out, fill it out as best you can, and then submit it to the institution of higher education that you're applying to so that they can actually form some assessment of the student's need. Some other ways of being able to pay for college is IDEA, which stands for an individual development account. It's basically a very high-yield savings account, and many different local credit unions or local economic development nonprofits or organizations will house these types of accounts, and it's free. Undocumented folks can apply for it. You just have to go online, figure out where those resources are. We also have a tremendous amount of online resources, websites like GoFundMe.com, Scholars Match, where students are able to put up their profiles and ask anyone around the country to go ahead and fund them. And we certainly have had a lot of students take advantage of that platform. But we also had students take advantage of their communities, go door to door, go to local businesses, and ask them to help sponsor their first year or help sponsor their books, whatever that might look like. So we certainly want to encourage that. And now with DACA, that we have approximately 400,000 or over 400,000 undocumented young people in the country currently that have DACA. this certainly being able to work has provided them an enormous amount of help in being able to pay for college. Go ahead, Carlos.
So students can also, right, on building on the community and the private scholarship, students can also generate a portfolio, right? It basically kind of has their resume on one end, and it has potentially like a writing sample or things that they've been involved with, and then giving that to different donors, right? So at UCLA, we had one student get pretty much all of his tuition paid for from some wealthy benefactor, and it was all because that student sent out that portfolio through his contacts and his email, right? And so somebody knew somebody else, and then inevitably that money came back to him, right? So we're trying to encourage you all not to limit yourselves, right? Think outside the box. There's different ways that money can come up with. It seems like a daunting task, but it's really just daunting because that's the way we want to perceive it. But once we actually kind of work towards it, then it's definitely possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Carlos. So I want to get to one more question here. So the 5 states that offer financial aid, do we encourage our students to apply with a paper FAFSA application? So no. So again, the paper FAFSA application should go to institutions if they actually need to assess the student's financial need for the purposes of financial aid. But each state will actually have their own separate process for state-based financial aid in those 5 states. So for example, here in California, we have an entire application process that's just for undocumented students that are applying for state-based financial aid. So I imagine that might be similar in other states, that they have their own process, but certainly that wouldn't be going through FAFSA in any way. Moving on. So next is connect and organize. Up here you see, this is actually our outreach team. These are a group of undocumented students and allies from all around here in the Bay Area who go out and do presentations to anyone, students, parents, educators, really anyone who has any vested interest in this issue and in supporting undocumented students. The power that we've seen is that really the knowledge is in these students. Their access to resources, these students are going to know. So if you want to gain access to a particular institution or you want to send students to a particular place, see if you're able to connect with undocumented students that are already there, because they're going to know who are the allies, where to go for resources, what not to do at that particular institution. And institutions vary so much in terms of their policies and their practices that having an inside track can provide you a tremendous amount of information. Where are the allies? Who are the folks that know enough or able to process something that might be challenging otherwise? So again, there really is a tremendous amount of information and wealth with these student leaders. And also encouraging folks to work with parents. As you can see, this is a picture of my parents, so that's my mom and my dad, and that's my college graduation, which was certainly a huge day for me, being that I am the first person in my entire family to attend high school. So my high school graduation was a big deal in my family. They didn't even know what to do with my college graduation, but it certainly was a tremendous day that I was able to celebrate with my mother and father, who, from the very beginning, the most important thing in my household was education. Like, I don't get fed in my household until I've done my homework, kind of thing. And which was always fascinating to me because no one in my family had a formal education. My father has a 6th grade education in Mexico. My mother has an 8th grade education in Mexico. And so really never having the benefits of a formal education whatsoever, it still was so fascinating to me how education was the most important thing in my household. And the one thing that they always told me would make the biggest difference for me in my life. And in working with so many parents all around the state, all around the country, we find the same thing, that all parents want is for their children to have a better future, for their children to have opportunity, but also for their children to be safe. And so what that requires is some educating. And we certainly do a tremendous amount of work with parents. We present to parents. We let them know, here are the myths. Here's some response to a lot of the things that they might have heard. And here's some access to resources. And at the very least, to be able to tell parents that it's possible to actually stand there in front of them as representations of what can be possible for their students. And we've seen this happen so many times, and it's tremendous what happens when parents are given even the most basic information. And what we've seen is that parents from that moment actually want to get more involved, actually want to provide more encouragement, want to come to the school, want to talk to the teachers, when they're actually given some direction or provided some role that they can fulfill in their students' lives. We have a parent line where we invite parents to call if they have any questions whatsoever, and we respond to any type of question that we can. We certainly, again, we're not immigration attorneys, so some of the technical legal immigration questions we may not be able to respond to, but anything else, we more than welcome. Again, the number is right here on the screen if you'd like to take advantage of that, and I know Carlos has something else as well.
Yeah, so this was basically going to touch on that last point that we have on screen, right? So inviting parents to lead. So many community organizations, they have a parental component or they're developing a parent component, right? And so really for parents to kind of stand beside each other and really talk about their experiences, sometimes even brag about their kids because, let's be real, some of these kids are amazing. Most of these kids are amazing. All of these kids are amazing. So they really enjoy the fact that this student is doing such and that this student is going to do such and such, right? So it really enriches their kind of experience, right, with education, knowing that there's other parents that are going through the same thing, right? And now that all this information gets tossed around in the media, right, it's definitely important for educators and for students and for just about anybody that really, really cares to educate these parents and let them know the right way and the information that will actually help their student get to college and succeed in college. Back to you, Jose.
Thank you, Carlos. Appreciate it. We have one question here that I think is actually pretty important. Do you find a growing number of students who are legal citizens or legal residents or U.S. citizens whose parents are undocumented and therefore are not eligible for federal aid via FAFSA? Now, this is very, very important. So as long as you are a U.S. citizen in this country, you are eligible for FAFSA regardless of the legal immigration status of your parents. So it's very, very important to note that a student can apply for FAFSA even if their parents are undocumented. Sometimes there's a question around taxes and taxation. But to be honest, most of our folks do pay taxes. A lot of parents pay income taxes regardless of whether or not they have a Social Security number. But I think that's a really big misconception that's out there, so that's actually a very important question. So thank you, Emily, for asking that. So moving forward here. So it certainly isn't easy to be undocumented in the United States. The first time I learned that I was undocumented was when I was 6 years old. And granted, at 6 years old, I didn't have really the capacity to understand what it meant to be undocumented. The only thing that I knew at 6 years old was that I wasn't allowed to tell anyone where I was from. I wasn't allowed to tell anyone where I was born. In fact, I was encouraged to not even speak Spanish in public if I could. At that point, I didn't know English either, so it just meant that I was a really quiet kid growing up. But that when I questioned why it was that I couldn't tell people where I was from, that the only response that I understood was that if anyone found out where I was from, that people would come to my house and take my mother and father away forever. And at 6 years old, I had to carry that. I had to live with that. That literally, when I went to school every single morning, I did not know whether or not my mother and father would still be there in the afternoon. And that is a tremendous burden for folks to carry. And that's a tremendous amount of fear that is still in our communities. And over the past few years, over the past 5-6 years, we've seen a huge increase in the number of deportations in this country. We've seen about 1.8 million people deported from the United States. That's 1.8 million fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, family members that are torn away from their family. The nightmare that I had when I was 5 years old has come true for far too many young folks in this country. And so how are we able to create a safe space given such a tremendously challenging political climate? And certainly you all can make a tremendous contribution to that. One is to just be aware of what we call citizenship privilege, right? Which is if you're a U.S. citizen, that provides you a tremendous amount of access and privilege and power that folks that don't have legal status don't have. What you do with that power is up to you, but it's incredibly important to just recognize that. Language is another thing that's incredibly important. So to not say things like illegal or illegal alien or illegal immigrant, to say things like undocumented, or here in California we use AB 540 as kind of a synonym for undocumented, but not using language that criminalizes the students that you work with. Also respecting the confidentiality of students, that if a student does tell you reveal your status, make sure you let them know, hey, look, I'm not going to tell anyone else. This is between you and I. Thank you so much for telling me. And in addition to that, don't ever ask students to self-identify. What we encourage folks to do, if they really do want to help, if they do want to support and be allies, is to actually offer resources to everyone. Offer resources to all the students that you work with. Because even if a student isn't undocumented, they may have a friend who's undocumented, they may have a family member who's undocumented, they may know someone who's undocumented, and so everyone can serve and everyone can benefit from the information. And once you put that out there and you've identified yourself as someone who's knowledgeable, at that point students will identify you and students will come to you when they have questions and when they have challenges. We also find it tremendously helpful to have one point person on your campus who is kind of the go-to person, who kind of knows the institutional environment, who knows where the resources are, which has been incredibly powerful in that way. In terms of actually working with students and encouraging them and working with them, some strategies that we employ is to encourage folks to not think of themselves as just undocumented. Thank you. The students are not just undocumented, right? That undocumented students are complex. They have different identities. So I may be undocumented, but I'm also a brother. I'm also a son. I'm a poli-sci nerd. I'm an athlete. There's all these different things that make me who I am. To be able to find a sacred space. And we define sacred space as literally a place or a thing or a hobby, something that students can do where they feel 100% accepted of who they are. We find that that's a tremendous thing to be able to offer and to learn how to dream again. Oftentimes when I work with students, the one question that I ask is, if you were to wake up tomorrow morning and you were a U.S. citizen, what would you do? And oftentimes students look at me like I'm kind of crazy, or they look at me kind of confused because it's not something we've ever had to think about. But over time, students actually think about or say, well, I'd want to study this, or I'd want to travel here, or I'd want to do this. And all the dreams that we've had to bury for so long because there's so many no's, so many obstacles we've had to confront seem to come out of nowhere. And so what we want to encourage folks to do is start there. What is your dream? What is it that you want to give your life to doing? Let's start there and let's just work backwards. What is it that we have to do to get you to that point? And we also want to encourage folks to seek out emotional and mental health services. That everything that I described to you has made a tremendous mark on me, but has been an incredible emotional burden to have to carry. And that's something that a lot of our folks have to carry, and to let them know that they don't have to carry that alone, and that there is support out there. And that could honestly make a tremendous amount of difference in a student's life. I know, Carlos, you wanted to comment on that.
Yes, so I myself, right, so addressing some of the points that were, on screen before, so I myself am a citizen, right, so I learned to check my citizenship privilege, right, but then I learned that there have been students across the country, and it's very, very common, that either contemplate or have committed suicide because they feel as if there's no way out, right? It's something that's overwhelming and they can't really figure out a way. And so that's why I would love to stress the fact of mental and emotional well-being that these students really, they really need. Just about as anybody else does, these students go through very, very difficult times, but they also go through, as Jose had said, right, the thought or the image or even the idea of losing their mom and dad, right? So these are definitely things that need to be taken care of, and that are very, very important, just as much as getting an education, is being, 100%, is being really emotionally wealthy, but emotionally healthy as well. That they can actually go out into the community and accept the fact that they are undocumented, but see the positive sides of it, right? The fact that they are soccer players, that they are mothers and brothers and sisters, and that they aspire to be somebody, right? So creating that safe space is something that is very, very essential to, future success. Back to you, Jose.
Thank you so much. And so we wanted to move forward into actually building institutional change. So all the folks you see in front of you are members of our Educator Action Group. All these folks are educators at different levels, at different institutions, high school, college, community college, state college, UC, private. All of them incredible champions, incredible allies, and all of them have been able to do a tremendous amount of work at their institutions, both in finding allies, but also in organizing students, in elevating students' voices, in being able to identify what are the institutional barriers and actually challenging the institution to change their policies or practices, and then actually get staff training. There have been many, many institutions where I've trained entire faculty and staff or entire departments on how to support the undocumented students that are there. And so certainly you can have a tremendous amount of impact in that way, but we also need you to advocate. And again, comprehensive immigration reform is on the table now. We need to continue to voice our opinions, so be able to find your local advocate or your local legal service provider or even your local legislator, and let them know that this is something you feel deeply about, and this is something that needs to pass for all of us. Because there's only so far we can go, even if we're able to graduate from college, even if we're able to get DACA, even if we're able to move forward in that way, that U.S. citizenship is where we need to go. And that will guarantee full equality, that will guarantee full participation in our society. So we need to continue to work towards that. And the final point that I want to leave you with is faith. So faith as simply the ability to believe that things will happen or that something will change when you have absolutely no reason or concrete evidence to believe that it will, but you believe it anyway. And it really was faith that has gotten me to this point. As you can see here, this is actually me, the little kid in the blue on the horse. And as you can see there, I'm on my mom's lap. And in the back, you can actually see our village. So that is where I was born. And now my family had absolutely no reason to believe in coming to the United States as undocumented immigrants that their undocumented son would end up going to a four-year university and getting a full scholarship and graduating with a degree in political science. There is absolutely no reason for them to believe that, but that's what they believed. And that if you can instill faith as a skill, right, not just necessarily as an idea, but as a skill, right, the ability to believe that things will happen or things will change regardless of what obstacles present themselves. If you can build that in the mind and heart of a student, that can be the greatest thing, and that can make the greatest difference, and it can even save a student's life. So with that, I want to thank everyone so much for listening. Again, here is my contact information and Carlos's contact information. Our website is www.e4fc.org. Please, I encourage you to go online. Please email me. Let me know if there's anything I can do or any way that I can support you in the work that you do. I'll let Carlos sign off as well.
So as Jose said, thank you very much for joining us here today. As you can see on screen, my information is on there. Any sort of possible way that I can be of help, please do not hesitate to outreach to me. I can definitely get back to you within 24 hours and definitely be an asset to whatever endeavor you are currently undergoing. And we wish you all the very, very best. And as Jose said, please do instill that faith as a skill in these students, because it's something that's definitely necessary and something that goes a very long way. Thank you, and have a great night.
And again, just to repeat my email address, it's up on the screen, but my email is just jose@e4fc.org, and the website is www.e4fc.org. All the resources that I had mentioned are all up on the website. And again, please email me if I can help in any way. I want to thank Carlos for co-presenting with me. Thank you so much, certainly for all the work that you do, Carlos. Really appreciate it. And I want to thank everyone so much for joining us. So just to close out, we hope that you'll join us again on October 17th to learn how school counselors can use social media to help their students effectively prepare for college. If you haven't already done so, please take a moment to register at www.collegeweeklive.com to receive updates on professional development webinars, as well as access to free college readiness tools, including lesson plans and live presentations that guide students through the admissions process. Thank you so much, and take care.